Cristóvão da Gama was a Portuguese military commander who led a Portuguese army of 400 musketeers on a crusade in Ethiopia and Somalia against the far larger Somali Muslim army of Imam Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi, aided by the Ottoman Empire. He was victorious against larger forces in 4 battles, but was seriously wounded in his last battle, after which he was captured and eventually executed. Sir Richard Burton, in his first footsteps in East Africa, referred to him as the most chivalrous soldier of a chivalrous age, early career. Cristóvão da Gama was the son of Vasco da Gama and younger brother of Estevão da Gama. He first came to India in 1532 with his brother, returned to Portugal in 1535, then joined Garcia de Noronha in sailing to Diu 6 April 1538. Many times in these travels he demonstrated a quick mind that saved his companions. In recognition of his usefulness, in 1541, his brother Estevão, then Viceroy of India, gave him command of a ship in the fleet Estevão led into the Red Sea against the Ottoman naval base at Suez. The Ethiopian campaign. Estevão's raid came to nothing, and he returned to Massawa on May 22, 1541, to rejoin the ships he had left there. While at Massawa, he attempted to salvage something from this raid by dispatching an expeditionary force under Cristóvão to assist the beleaguered Emperor of Ethiopia, Gelawdewos. 400 Portuguese men-at-arms were selected, 70 of whom were also skilled artisans or engineers, and 130 slaves for this expedition. Equipped with about 1,000 arquebuses, an equal number of pikes and several bombards, João Bermudes, who had represented himself as the Patriarch of Ethiopia to the Portuguese, accompanied this expedition. An account of this campaign in the Ethiopian highlands was later written by Miguel de Castanhazo, who accompanied Gama and was an eyewitness to almost everything he recorded. The men were landed at Massawa and Akiko, the next port south of Massawa, and began their trek inland to Dabawa, the capital of the Barnegus, or Ethiopian viceroy for the northern provinces. The Portuguese reached Dabawa after a march of 11 days on the 20th of July, to learn that the rainy season made further travel impossible. Cristóvão would not allow his men to pass the months in idleness, employing them in constructing sledges for the bombards and in raiding nearby villages that had accepted Ahmed Guri's rule. He also learned from the Barnegus that Queen Sabla Wengel was camped nearby on top of a mountain that Ahmed had not been able to reduce by siege. With 100 men, he marched to the mountain, and invited Queen Sabla Wengel to join him. She did so, bringing her entourage of 30 men and 50 women, all of whom were received with careful ceremony. Once the rains ended, the Portuguese continued south. After months of being slowed by their equipment, Da Gama decided to leave half of it in an arsenal on Debrademo. His army passed the Church of St. Romanos around Christmas of 1541, and celebrated Epiphany in the province of Agame. Gama's first encounter with the Somali troops was the 2nd of February 1542 at the Battle of Basenta, which Whiteway located on Ambasenate in Haramat. The invaders had taken possession of a hill from which they made raids into the countryside, although Queen Sabla Wengel advised Gama to march around this hill, advising him to wait until her son Emperor Gelawdewos could arrive from Shewa and join him. He believed that failing to engage the invaders would make the natives distrust his troops, and that they would then stop bringing food and supplies. Fortunately, the engagement was an unquestioned success, and Gama's men took the hill despite superior enemy numbers, losing only 8 men. At the end of February, 2 Portuguese arrived from a ship anchored at Massawa, escorted by 6 people native to the area. Gama responded with a detachment of 40 men to make contact, obtain supplies, and exchange news. This group failed to reach the ship before it sailed, and the only outcome was that these soldiers and the captain were absent for the next battle, which was against Ahmed Guri himself. As Queen Sable Wengal had feared, the events at Bassentu alerted Ahmed that a hostile army had entered the area, and he marched north to confront it. Meeting Gama at Jata, the Imam made the first contact, sending a messenger to Gama to demand that the Portuguese force either leave Ethiopia, join Ahmed Guri, or be destroyed. On the Imam's orders, the messenger produced the gift of a monk's habit, an expensive insult to Gama. Gama responded with his own messenger, who delivered a few lines in Arabic, stating that he had come to Ethiopia by order of the Great Lion of the Sea, and on the following day he, Ahmed, would see what the Portuguese were worth. Ing delivered Gama's own insulting gift, a pair of small tweezers for the eyebrows, and a very large mirror, making him out to be a woman. 2 battles followed these exchanges at Jata, the first on the 4th of April and the next on the 16th of April. The first battle was a victory for the Portuguese, although Gama lost one of his captains. Ahmed Guri was wounded, which forced his troops to retire to the far side of the plain. The Portuguese, finding their encampment on the battlefield becoming unbearable, moved across the plain next to the enemy camp, which led to the second battle. This time, the Somali Ottoman army was even more soundly defeated, and according to Castan Hazo, the victory would have been complete this day had we only had 100 horses to finish it. Ahmed Guri was forced to retreat further south, where with fortune against him, the local population now openly defied him by refusing to provide him supplies or soldiers. Whiteway identifies the Imam's refuge as a village named Wajarat, while J. Spencer Trimmingham places it in the Zobel Mountains overlooking the Afar Depression. Gama marched after him as far as Lake Ashangi, where on the advice of Queen Sable Wengal, he made camp on a hill in Wofla as the rainy season started. At some point late in the rains, Gama was approached by a Jew, who told him of a mountain stronghold that Ahmed Guri's followers controlled weekly. It was also at this time that Gama was accurately informed about the Emperor George's true strength. The Ethiopian monarch was living as an outlaw in the south with only 60 to 70 men in his army. However, the mountain was the major barrier between the two allies, and Gama also learned that the garrison had a large number of horses, a resource he had badly needed at the Second Battle of Jata. Gama swiftly marched south with about 100 men, and seized control of the mountain, leaving 30 men behind to bring the horses. Gama led his victorious men back to Wofla, to find Ahmed Guri in position to attack that next morning. Having successfully petitioned the governor of Zabad in South Arabia, as well as offering much money and submission to the official, Guri received 2,900 musketeers, many more than Gama had. Despite their bravery, the Portuguese were heavily defeated the 28th of August at the Battle of Wofla, with only 170 surviving the assault. And Gama, his arm broken from a bullet, was captured that night with 14 companions by a Somali patrol. Gama's death and aftermath. Cristóvão da Gama was brought to Ahmed Guri's camp, where the Imam produced the tweezers Gama had given him and began to pluck out his beard. There Gama was tortured in an attempt to force him to convert to Islam. Castan Hazo's and Geronimo Lobo's account after him describe Gama's fortitude and death in language worthy of a hagiography, complete with miracles. In the end, Ahmed Guri chopped off Gama's head and tossed it into a nearby spring, whose waters, Castan Hazo reported, gained a reputation for giving health to the sick. Lobo elaborates upon this story, claiming that upon hearing of this miracle the Imam had a dead dog tossed into the spring and the spring covered with a cairn of stones. Lobo confirms this detail in describing the account of a party sent to retrieve Gama's remains and send them to his nephew, Vasco da Gama Conde David Aguirre. Certain that the surviving Portuguese were scattered, without their firearms, and alone in a foreign land, Ahmed Guri concluded that this threat was ended, dismissed all but 200 of the foreign musketeers, and proceeded to his camp at G on the shores of Lake Tana. However, over 120 men had joined Queen Sabla Wengel, who had taken refuge at the Mountain of the Jews. 10 days later her son, Emperor Gelawdewos, arrived and they took measure of their situation. Using the arms stockpiled at Debra-Damo, the Portuguese were able to rearm themselves, with the promise of their ability. Gelawdewos was able to raise a new army, which met Ahmed Guri at Waina Daga. The Portuguese musketeers aimed their fire only at the Muslim musketeers, who had played a decisive part at Woflalar, and at Imam Ahmed himself. While the sources differ on the exact details, all agree that Ahmed Guri was killed by the men of Cristóvão da Gama to avenge their commander's death.